to get it right. That's a problem, but maybe give us a richer sense of what's going on. Any other last words on Botswana? Yeah.
I just want to add on to a possible explanation of it. I guess one could be the fact that one party stayed in power. Maybe it's like just like a politically stable, just like Botswana and other countries. Parties it's party in power the next time. They change a lot, the political change. I think a lot of instability will occur, and maybe because one party stayed in power, they were able to pull one system and one policy.
And be really farsighted and plan.
Over a lot of years.
Yeah. Okay. Last word. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's an issue. There still is high inequality in Botswana. They also have a low poverty rate, though. I mean, it's a wealthy country. So, if you're in the bottom quintile or bottom quartile of the distribution, you're much better off than neighboring countries. So I think that's the kind of, you could look at that as a glass half full or glass half empty problem. But it's an important issue. The other important issue beyond inequality. So inequality is an important issue in Botswana that we haven't really touched on, but remains a politically important issue. The other thing we haven't talked about at all is HIV/AIDS, which hit Botswana incredibly hard. And they have among the highest prevalence in the world. It's really been an incredible it's had economic consequences in addition to human and health consequences. So that's the other major issue, and I haven't focused on it as much because it's not really part of the success story. That happened before the HIV/AIDS epidemic, but it's a critical policy issue right now. Okay, so a little bit of recap of the course. I just want to go through some of the main themes and just think through how things kind of fit together. Early on we talked about some key questions. We talked about sort of questions we may want to have an answer to. I'm not going to have a great answer for them now, but hopefully because of the different country cases and the different topics we focused on in sectors, you have something of a sense about these questions. About sort of what happened in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Why did economic performance deteriorate? What were some of the changes since 2000? We have talked about the role of democratic institutions. We have talked about these very important economic policy changes over time, related to marketing boards, but other policies. We've also talked about the spread of new technology. So a lot of things have changed. It's hard to get a handle on exactly what's causing what, especially with 40-something quite different countries. But despite that, I still want to have a quicker question, despite how hard it is to do it. So that was the caveat. But I want to get people's kind of sense, and maybe I'll take 2 minutes for this one, just because it's not something you can necessarily do right away. If you have to think about the different themes in the course, the different issues, the different policies, like what is the real driver of the recent turnaround? What happened after about 2000 to lead to this much faster economic growth? Where now all of a sudden the rest of Sub-Saharan Africa is looking more like Botswana. I mean, growing rapidly, lots more economic opportunities. Is it the cell phones and the new information technologies which started spreading around that time? Is it the democratization wave that just changed the essence of political power and accountability? Is it the long-run benefits of these earlier reforms we talked about in the structural adjustment era? Is it all really driven by rising education, something that we saw was really a very big change in the 60s, 70s, and 80s? Even when growth wasn't occurring, economic growth, there was big expansion of education. Or is it something else, or is this just a foolish way to pose a question with 40-something quite different countries with different histories, institutions, and trajectories? Okay, so again, we got a lot of spread. A lot of these, the democratization wave, a lot of information technology, earlier reforms. And again, the point that was raised before about the mutual exclusivity definitely holds here, because you might say, the combination of better institutions and policymaking in a setting where there were all these new technologies that could be adopted is what led to the change, and so on. But it is interesting for me to see there is so much spread. For someone who put E, if it isn't just, hey, there's too many country-specific factors, if there was another core explanation that you think was a driver continent-wide, can you raise your hand or let us know what you think it is? Something that we didn't put on the board here? Yeah. That's an interesting point. So, does it have something to do with climate? And I think early on in the course, I forget which lecture, I put up a plot of sort of average rainfall levels, and it turned out that from the late 70s into the 90s, that was a period of just historically anomalously low rainfall Africa-wide. So part of this could be a weather or climate phenomenon, that there was a really bad 15 years of rainfall in many countries that depressed economic activity. So I didn't put that up here. And then as rainfall has returned to historical averages in the last 10 or 15 years, you won't have the sort of that drag on the economy. Yeah. Okay, so another possible explanation is Asian influence. Maybe it's economic models from Asia. So there were a lot of very poor countries that did grow rapidly in the 80s and 90s, and maybe some of those policy decisions are being adopted in Sub-Saharan Africa. Maybe it's the trade. Maybe it's the massive inflows of foreign investment in mining sector, communications, infrastructure. So that's a potential influence. What else? Yeah. Yeah, so the foreign aid business changed a lot, really in the 90s, where it was sort of big funding for big projects, the big governments changed. And the World Bank was part of that change, and they were lagging, but they actually adopted a lot of that ideology in some of their lending, at least. A lot of the bilaterals did. So maybe to the extent that foreign assistance is playing a catalytic role, the change in the nature of foreign assistance helps spark this. Yeah. So growing sort of international migration leading to remittances and investment, okay? So that could be another factor that's helping in many cases. Okay, last word, any last sort of big explanation or theory? Yeah. Okay, so the sort of adoption of antiretroviral therapies for HIV/AIDS, which again really starts spreading around 2003, 2004. So maybe a little bit into the turnaround, but maybe they've contributed to the turnaround where there really weren't widely available antiretrovirals before around 2003. Okay, so there's a lot of other explanations, and we've discussed a lot of these in the course. There's clearly no one story, but it's worth trying to narrow down explanations and be parsimonious, if nothing else, so you can have a kind of structured way of thinking about the problem. But also, so when people say, oh, you took a class in African development, so why is Africa growing so quickly? So I get asked that all the time, and my answer is always just take my course, and 15 weeks later, you'll just be as confused as you are now. Okay, so let's just go on to the next point. Okay, another bit of the overview, in addition to these kind of themes and big picture, I just want to summarize. We went through a bunch of econometric methods. I tried to weave them in with topics so that we weren't just sitting here deriving estimators. We discussed OLS regression a little bit, randomized experiments, difference and differences, regression discontinuity, instrumental variables, pre-analysis plans. There was, I think, a fair amount of discussion of data quality and data collection, both in lecture and in section, which is critical for any kind of analytical work, because if you have bad data, it's hard to know what you're really estimating. We went through a couple of different models, and simple theory and growth models, the models of individual behavior in the context of risky sexual choices. Quite a number of public policy discussions in the education sector, in the health sector, in the agriculture sector, related to the financial sector, as well as around corruption and governance. So I think a lot of the major topics were discussed. We did discuss infrastructure actually, a number of points. We also discussed climate and environment when we talked about weather shocks and climate shocks. So I think that's another sector, environment, that's also was discussed. And there were a number of country cases that we returned to a few times. We've talked about, I think, Kenya and Sierra Leone a lot. Of course, that's completely random. It has nothing to do with the fact that I've worked on those two countries. We've also discussed Ghana a number of times, especially around agricultural policy, and of course Botswana now. What were some of the other countries we dove into? We talked about Tanzania some. So Tanzania is another one that was discussed. What were some of the other? We talked about Malawi a little bit in the case of HIV, but not very much on Malawian sort of institutions or politics, I don't think. So these are very Anglophone. These are very English speaking. Partially this reflects, again, the countries where I've done fieldwork. Partially this reflects the literature in English on Sub-Saharan Africa. The literature in French on Sub-Saharan Africa has much better representation of Francophone countries, French-speaking countries. So there's a limitation of the scholarship and the kinds of readings that a class in the U.S. where French language skills are not required. Place us, and I guess we could translate more. We should probably, but these are some of the countries that I think just going into the final, you should just feel comfortable with some dimensions of these countries. We spend some time talking through their policies and politics, and it's the kind of thing I could ask about on a final. So just talking about the final a little bit. The structure of the final is going to be like the midterm in terms of the type of questions. There's going to be 4 questions of similar length to the midterm, but of course you're going to have a lot more time. So the midterm was 80 minutes. The final is going to be 170 minutes, right? 3 hours minus whatever the 10-minute starting time. So you'll have basically twice as much time for like a third more questions. So time is not going to be as much of an issue on the final, but it's going to be the same sort of structure. There's going to be some essay type questions that ask you to deal with. I've now posed a bunch of questions just now about these broad trends, about particular country cases, country comparisons, broad sectoral themes. There's going to be a question that's going to have some kind of model or theoretical focus, so I want you to feel comfortable talking through some of the modeling frameworks we discussed. And then there's going to be probably 2 questions that have some relationship to data, econometric methods, interpretation of results, basically like I think the third question on the midterm, where I basically pose a setting, I tell you what some of the statistics are, or what the research design is, and I ask you to interpret the results. So it's very much going to be like the midterm in terms of topics. It's going to cover the whole course. There are going to be some questions from the first half of the course with slight overrepresentation for the second half of the course, which we didn't cover on the midterm. But there will be questions from the first half too, and some of the questions will inherently span the course. Like if I asked you about some of the questions I put up before about these broad trends, you're going to probably have to draw on things from throughout the course. Okay, let me pause. Any questions or thoughts? I think there's going to be a review section here in Leon, but I guess you guys at 3B Space will let people know. Do you know when it's going to be already? Okay, so next week sometime. There will be a review section. Okay, let me end then with just 1 or 2 more points and then we'll wrap up. I want to kind of step back to the beginning of the course. Now, the great thing about teaching this course now is we have the last 12 or 13 years of real sort of poverty reduction, economic growth, political reform to point to, but at the same time, relative to the other major developing regions, the last 50 years have not been widely successful for Sub-Saharan Africa. Growth rates are lower than Asia, etc. And the question I want to ask is, should we be surprised that the last few decades have been so turbulent? That there's been political instability, there's been civil war, there's been a lot of failed economic policy. And I think the answer has to be probably we shouldn't be that surprised. When you look historically at other new countries, there are often very long transition periods until the institutions in those countries, the political culture, the social norms, etc., stabilize or take root. Think of the U.S. So the U.S. was a colony, became independent, and then there was the War of 1812, and there was a massive civil war in this country, an incredibly bloody civil war. And it was really only after that there were the sort of political reforms and constitutional reforms that made the sort of modern United States. If we look at independence in Latin America, which took place a couple decades after the U.S., again, it just took decades, took 70, 80 years, really, till close to the end of the 19th century, before most Latin American countries' constitutions, their political systems, and their identities stabilized. So you have decades of war, where in the part of South America where my family's from, in Uruguay, there was, there really wasn't a formal political authority in any stable way till 1890s. So that's 70 years after independence. Uruguay, Argentina, and Brazil invaded Paraguay and took away, 2/3 of its land and killed half the male population. There were wars with, Bolivia and Chile, and we could go on country after country and look at political instability just lasting decades. So maybe it isn't that surprising that when new African countries emerge, there is going to be political instability, violence for a time. And then the question is, has that time now passed? I mean, are we at a point where most African countries' political systems and constitutional arrangements are well established enough that Sub-Saharan Africa has passed this turbulent post-birth period? I think that's the open question that we face. And I think the answer to that is maybe. If we look at the past decade, it's incredibly promising. At the same time, there were earlier success stories. If we look at the case of Kenya as an economic, country that's often pointed to as economic and political success story, its politics are still quite unstable. We saw that in the 2007 election. Earlier success stories like Cote d'Ivoire and Zimbabwe were pointed to as like incredible economic success stories in the 80s and early 90s, and later descended into either civil war or political violence. So the foundations are there, but they are fragile. And it is an open question exactly what the next decade will look like. I don't know if people have any thoughts on that. Will economic growth in the next 12 or 15 years be as rapid as the last 12 or 15 years? Or is this kind of a high watermark? Yeah. You pick option E, as usual. That's always my favorite one.
Yeah, so I think that's globalization that's going to be key. So if, say, Africa becomes more localized from China, and there's a great economic aspect for things not getting. So on the other hand, if everything's great, then people will be booming.
Yeah. So the global economy is going to matter in terms of markets and investment? Definitely, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, not going to go forward negative, but I think climate change is going to be not all one way to go.
Yeah. So this has the potential to be very destabilizing. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's huge the next decade because the deficits are still there. They're kind of strong. Second, there are going to be a lot of turnover in the countries next year, and the countries that are on more stable ground, they're going to be less development and what's going on, especially again.
So a lot of promise for future political reform and economic progress. Okay, so kind of a mixed bag with some optimism. I want to just before we wrap up have Leon and Pierre stand up and everybody give them a round of applause. For doing a great job, and also thank all of you. So I just want you all to applaud for yourself. This is a great class with a lot of involvement and different perspectives, but it was also very respectful. So good luck on the final.